So unless you haven't been on YouTube in a while, you've probably seen All Tomorrow's The Future of Humanity in your YouTube recommended feed, if not had someone outright tell you about it. Surprisingly enough, All Tomorrow's is actually a pretty old story, despite the fact that it's just becoming popular now, the original story being released way back in 2008. This new dramatization brought in a new influx of fans and attention, which is great. It's a terrific story. I do mean terrific in more than one sense. It's both awesome and terrifying. There's a few antagonists in All Tomorrows, but the Q stand out as the most infamous. The brutal morphing of humanity into whatever form they see fit makes all the hostile aliens bent on wiping out humans and other sci-fi seem downright kind. The fact they're so brutal to humans is why the theory I'm about to pitch you probably seems impossible if you're familiar with All Tomorrows. Today I'm here to tell you that the Q are actually humans themselves that have time traveled from the distant future to change their own fate. As I make my case, there's something I want you to keep in mind, and that is what All Tomorrows does differently than most other sci-fi. It really explores the effects that deep time would have on societies. What is deep time? Well, you probably heard those surprising facts like Cleopatra living closer to the opening of the first Taco Bell than she did to the building of the pyramids, or that T-Rex lived closer to humans than it did to the Spinosaurus. All of human civilization so far has only existed in the ballpark of 5,000 years. How will humans even think of themselves after 200 million years from now? It's hard to imagine. To move forward with my theory, we do need to make a quick recap of All Tomorrows. While I go through it, I want you to see if you notice a pattern. Pattern of flourishing, genetic modification, and destruction. We need to make this quick though, so just consider this the cliff notes. Needless to say, if you want to learn more, check out the dramatization, or better yet, the actual book. And if you don't need a recap, I've conveniently timestamped the chapters in this video, so feel free to skip ahead. We start in a not so far off time period. We finally manage to colonize Mars. The people of Mars start to change physically over their generations, both naturally from living on a world that has so much lower gravity, and also artificially to better tolerate the environment by genetically modifying themselves. Eventually, Mars becomes as powerful as Earth, and tensions rise into a resource war. It's the first time that humans fight a war with a death toll in the billions. We almost wipe ourselves out. When the smoke clears, a peace is made between the Earthlings and Martians, and to prevent a future war, it's decided that, on a whole, the human race should be modified into a single cohesive race again, one better for expanding to the stars while we're at it. And so the Star People are born. The Star People are extremely successful and start to spread through our arm of the galaxy. Humans come to inhabit hundreds of worlds and thrive. Something is strange though. Plant and animal life has proven to be somewhat common in the galaxy, but there's no sign of sentient life. Sure, our estimates for running into intelligent life is rural in reality, but it's not zero. Eventually though, we do find a sign. Ancient dinosaur bones are found on a faraway world, a direct descendant from an Earth dinosaur. There's no way to explain it. It's either proof that Earth was visited millions of years ago by aliens, or that some kind of god is real. Either way, it's extremely alarming, and the Star People start a massive armament campaign to be prepared for the first contact. After all, whatever species was capable of interstellar flight millions of years ago would be millions of years more advanced by now. They are unfortunately correct. The Q invade the Star People Empire and defeat them quickly and easily. The Q see themselves as some sort of gods and don't regard humans as any more important than any other animal. Or even more like objects that they can rebuild however they see fit. You see, the Q have an extremely strong grasp of genetic modification, and they use it to seemingly punish humanity. They conquer all the human world to be able to transform us into all manner of creatures. In almost all cases, they disable our sentience, turning us into simple animals, from fish to worms. All still human, mind you. They still look uncannily human, just horrifically reshaped. It turns out the ones reduced to animals had it easy. The Colonials suffered the worst fate. The world actually managed to fight off the Q twice before falling. To punish them, the Q turned them into nothing more than blocks of flesh with a single eye and their full sentience intact. With the sole purpose of processing Q waste, they were fully aware of their horrific fate. Extinction would have been welcome to them, but the Q made them particularly efficient. Even after the Q leave, they'd continue to live in this state for 40 million years. A big part of All Tomorrows is documenting all the species that the Q create. I don't have time to go through them all today. Suffice to say that some humans get off easy, some get off hard, and most go extinct. Eventually, though, several of these races evolve sentience again after tens of millions of years pass. Even the pitiful Colonials manage to get back on their feet. As these post-humans start to expand into the galaxy once more, they find the ruins of the Star People, and the Q alike, and learn of their fate. They start running into one another. No one wants what happened to the Star People to happen again, and so the united post-humans chose to cooperate with each other rather than fight, and then form the Second Human Empire. There are a few happy endings in All Tomorrows, though. The Q did a shoddy job in the creation of one species, failing to bury their sentience deeply and not making their bodies that far off from human. Even further, these so-called ruin haunters have a homeworld littered with Q and Star People ruins. All of this leads to them advancing technology millions of years faster than all the other post-humans, while not quite being culturally ready for it. They almost wipe themselves out, but they survive. Their love for technology becomes fanatical and they drop their biological bodies for mechanical ones. Their consciousness is uploaded, they become the Gravitals. They're still human, with all their pride, ambition, and hatred. They come to hate biological life, and eventually descend upon the Second Human Empire, utterly destroying all the post-humans except for one. The Bug Facers were a post-human race that actually ran into another alien race while they were expanding. We don't know much about who these other aliens were. They probably weren't the Q, seeing as the Bug Facers actually won, but the encounter leaves them extremely xenophobic, and the slowest race to trust the human empire. For some reason, the Gravitals spare them, but once again, perhaps death would have been preferable. Genetic modification that the Gravitals do to the Bug Facers make what the Q did look tame. The Q didn't actually manage to wipe out all the star people, though. Some were able to hide in deep space, living in hollowed-out asteroids. These humans started to evolve for life in zero gravity, transforming into the Spacers. They stayed silent for all the millions of years the Q stuck around, not wanting to be found. Spared the fate of the rest of the human race, the Spacers would continue to develop technology and continue to evolve, becoming the barely recognizable Asteromorphs, with brains so advanced a single thought would be incomprehensible to modern humans. The Asteromorphs were just as silent as the Spacers had been, though. Despite the Q threat being gone, they preferred to just watch, not joining the Second Human Empire, just staying to the asteroid belts and Oort clouds and most stars in the galaxy. Even as the Gravitals ruthlessly wiped out all of humanity, they did nothing. Tensions were high between the two species. The Gravitals held most of the planets while the Asteromorphs stuck to the outer reaches as they always had. Both races were unfathomably powerful, and neither wanted mutually assured destruction. Finally, civil upheaval in the Gravital society gave the Asteromorphs the opportunity they needed. The war that ensued was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen, as these absolute titans clashed. The Asteromorphs came up on top and punished the Gravitals. Destroying the Gravitals would have been a waste. After all, they were hyper-advanced computers, essentially. The Asteromorphs kept them around, removed their abilities to manipulate gravity, and disarmed their aggressive tendencies. The Asteromorphs were finally the sole power in the galaxy, and they were quick to start playing God. They started to populate the galaxy with all manner of human life forms again, but this time they didn't want things to go wrong. They create the Terrestrials to function as middlemen between the Asteromorphs and the new humans. If the Asteromorphs are gods, these beings were kings. The system was flawed, and the Terrestrials often ruled with an iron fist, or leading to corrupt dystopias. The Asteromorphs were brutal in their own way, wanting to avoid another Gravital incident so badly they would often destroy any of their creations for simply being guilty of wrongthing. And then humans disappear. More events happen, but our narrator, or author of All Tomorrows, that skims over them, such as the Asteromorphs uniting with aliens from other galaxies to wipe out the Q. But he does say that humans vanished without a trace, which is an important note for our theory. He also mentions that Earth was found, but no one cared. Alright, welcome back for those of you who skipped the recap. As we get into the theory here, something of note is that the author constantly refers to the Bug Facers as being the last of biological humanity, which seems really weird, right? The Asteromorphs are human. In fact, their lineage is straight back to the original humans, uncorrupted by the Q. So why would the author not consider them human, unless maybe the Asteromorphs didn't see themselves as human? The Asteromorphs didn't join the Second Human Empire. They also did nothing to stop the Gravitals from wiping out the other post-humans. They almost seem to be emotionless and uncaring about their fellow man at all. Say what you will about the Gravitals, but the social upheaval that left them vulnerable was that some parts of the Gravital society started to become quite empathetic for their human creations. The Asteromorphs even started to play God, the exact same thing that the Qs and Gravitals did before them. Maybe with much less malice, but with no real intent to let their creations live freely. The fact that they don't even care about the rediscovery of Earth shows that the Asteromorphs didn't really care about human history either. They had millions of years to locate the planet and a godlike level of technology, and yet they didn't. So what's left? What would be interesting to a hyper-advanced race that finally brought vengeance upon its greatest enemy? Connected the stars with wormholes? That had played God in the sandbox of a galaxy? What's the final frontier after you've conquered space? Time. The author says that humanity vanished without a trace. He offers that they could have wiped themselves out, but that seems unlikely. The level of destruction that a race as powerful as that fighting a civil war would be impossible to miss. Keep in mind, the author was fully aware of the Gravital and Asteromorph wars, so how could he miss a war between the Asteromorphs and themselves, which would have been more apocalyptically huge? He offers that maybe they ascended to another plane of existence. A not so uncommon trope in sci-fi, like 2001: A Space Odyssey and Star Trek, is that that's the ultimate evolution of a species. It would have been difficult, though, for all humans to ascend simultaneously. One of the alien races surely would have spotted the gradual transition. Time travel, though, would be incredibly tempting to a race that sees themselves as gods. No longer would you only be able to play with the way things are, but you can meddle with them before they came to be. Expansion into the entire universe would become trivial, since by going back in time you could expand far before other aliens even crawl out the primordial soup, which, by the way, would totally explain why no one knows what happened to humanity. After all, you'd want to keep it secret to your competitors that you're going to go back in time to outcompete them. Perhaps most tempting of all, though, you could shape your own society as you saw fit, so much earlier in its infancy, perhaps leading to an even greater version of yourself in the new future. And so the Asteromorphs go back in time, now freshly equipped with the knowledge of where Earth is. That's never been done before. To do so requires overcoming so many paradoxes. They're gods, though. Surely it's no problem for them. No, they overshoot their target date. They arrive in the Cretaceous period millions of years before humans evolve. They're too early. They need to wait for the evolution of Homo sapiens before the real fun can begin. So they take an Earth dinosaur instead for the moment. There's other ways to have fun. Why don't we drop it off on this faraway planet that's populated with copper-boned life forms and see how it does? They can come back for humans later. By now they've evolved even more, but they've also left their vast infrastructure behind in the future. Without it, they're not nearly as strong as they were. Their god complex is still alive and well, though. Established they don't see themselves as human anymore, they lack empathy for their own race. The amount of time that's passed, they might only have a vague idea of why they came back in the first place. Or maybe they do know why. Maybe the almighty Q have decided that in order to bring out the strongest of humanity, they need to mix things up. The star people were weak, and humans need to be strong. Maybe by making them suffer, we can build such a desire for vengeance that they'll become stronger. Maybe we should just let them live totally carefree and happy lives. Maybe that's what being human really is. Why don't we give one race of humans a huge evolutionary and technological advantage right from the start? And that'll lead to some really strong humans in a few million years. One last thought that's more based on the artwork rather than text. Take a look at the classic Q picture and the combination picture between the God Asteromorph and the Graviton picture. They're extremely similar. The Asteromorph has 4 gliding-shaped flaps that can easily evolve into the wings like the Q. It has 4 primary arms that could possibly merge with those gliders and have the same wing structure as the Q. They both have one big, long lower appendage. Most importantly, though, is the symbolism. It can't be anything other than intentional. The Q are grasping the Vitruvian man. The Asteromorphs are sitting on the conquered Graviton. Also of note is that the Q are extremely fleshy. If they are truly evolved from some kind of insect like it seems at first glance, then they should have some kind of exoskeleton structure. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Humans' greatest enemy in All Tomorrows turned out to actually be itself. I admit this theory isn't perfect. Ascension is still a fairly viable explanation of where the humans went. If the Q are Asteromorphs, they should be far stronger than they were, and the pre-colonial humans shouldn't have been able to beat them twice. However, the theory does fill quite a few holes, while fitting in with the whole vicious cycle of genetic engineering, destruction, and flourishing that humanity seems to be stuck in. At the end of the day, this is just for fun. Now, where's my human flesh brick? I need to take a dump.